everyone, welcome back to my channel So Little Time, and my name is Karen. So today is collaboration number 2 with Angela from Devon Threadtales, and we have come together again to give you a pattern review all about the Tilly and the Buttons Marigold Jumpsuit. So it wasn't our plan to do another jumpsuit for our next collaboration, but it just so happened that we both had this pattern on our to sew list and we each had fabric lined up for it as well. So it just seemed the next logical step to take. And I have been sort of sitting on this pattern for about 2 years, so I was really pleased that I was finally getting around to sewing it up. Now, I picked my fabric 2 years ago, which is a viscose fabric, which I picked up from Bobbins Buttons in Leicester. And I actually did buy this fabric specifically for this pattern, so I'm really pleased that I paired them up together. Although I have to say, I did find it very tricky to work with. Viscose isn't my favourite fabric. It just slips about and doesn't behave itself when sewing, and even cutting out is quite challenging, as I did find that this time round as well. Angela will be featured in my video a little bit later on, so you will see her version and you will see that we have used completely different fabric types and styles, and also we have got slightly different jumpsuits from our finished make as well. So I'll head you on over to her in a little while, and also please do check out her video on her YouTube channel as well. So like I say, I've used a viscose fabric, which I did find very challenging to work with, and I was a little bit negative from the get-go making this up. We were sat down on a Zoom sewing session that we do bi-weekly, and I just didn't seem to have everything to hand that I needed to make this jumpsuit. I was missing the elastic, the zip, and then there was, in the instructions, it was telling that you had to interface quite a lot of pieces, and I didn't have any interfacing. I just was not prepared. So I didn't have a very good start to the sewing journey initially. So we just cut out the fabric pieces on our first sewing sessions together, and that was our first sort of start process of this pattern, and I just had a nightmare cutting it out. Now, viscose fabric tends to shift around quite a lot, so I did spray starch some of my pieces to give it a bit more stability, but I still had problems cutting it out where it moved around quite a lot. And even though I used pattern weights and my rotary cutter to cut it out, a lot of my pattern pieces I found had moved and they just weren't very straight at all. Especially the waistband piece, which needs to be straight, and it was a bit wibbly wobbly, but luckily, because that area is cinched in with elastic, I managed to get away with it, thank goodness. So the make itself I did find quite challenging overall, and I do think that was purely because of my fabric choice. It was just a lot difficult to handle. Yeah, and there are a few sort of tricky steps in the process anyway, so that didn't help. I ended up borrowing the instructions from Angela for this because my pattern was free with the Molly Makes magazine quite a while ago, and the instructions that came with that are quite sparse, so I really did need the Tilly and the Buttons instructions, as they do hold your hand and go through the process in a step-by-step sort of way a lot better. So I did that, but I just had it on my phone, and I wish I'd have printed them off actually, because it would have been better to have them to hand at the side all the time whilst I was sewing. So during the sewing process, I also started questioning my fabric choice because it is very busy and very vibrant. And when I made the trouser section up, I was a little bit concerned that it might be a bit too loud. But Angela said, you know, just keep going, and once you get the bodice on, you might feel differently about it. And I actually do. I really like how the garment has turned out in the end, although during the sewing, I was sort of cursing the sewing process as I was going along. I just didn't feel like I was enjoying it as much as I do other makes. And I was just thinking, you know, am I really going to be pulling this garment out of the wardrobe at the end of all this sewing or not? You know, we will see. But actually, I have been wearing it quite a lot, and it's very comfortable to wear, so I am really pleased with the overall finished garment. So I made this straight size 4, which corresponds to my body measurements, and I did find that it fitted really well, although I decided to give myself a little bit more room in the bum area and the hip area by using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance down the side seams and the inside leg seams, but I did keep the crotch curve using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance for that, just because I did baste it at 3/8 of an inch, but I just found that that gave me a little bit too much room in the bum area, but I just needed a little bit more of a generous bit of room for my hips and sitting down and manoeuvring around in it. So it's a really nice style. It has a bit more of a relaxed sort of feel compared to the collaboration that we did previously, which was the New Look 6446 jumpsuit. This is just a bit more of a casual everyday style, and it's quite loose, so it's really, really comfortable to wear. I opted to go with the Sweetheart neckline that comes as standard in the pattern, and I really like how that looks. It's just something a little bit different to have in my wardrobe. It has these lovely thick straps, as you can see here, which cover your bra straps up really nicely. And I did just have to make a slight alteration to the way they were inserted into the facing and the bodice, as it's sandwiched in between. It is quite a short facing, so there isn't much room to play with. I think there's only about an inch there, and I just had to get them sitting slightly different to the way they were inserted initially, so they were flat, as I found that they were kind of going off out at a direction like that, which just kept slipping off my shoulders and just felt a little bit too long as well. So I had to do that on the front and the back, so I just have to go in and unpick both bits to be able to make that alteration to get them sitting flat. So around the back, you'll see that it's quite a flat back area here, but the straps do sit in nice and flush with that, and I really do like how that looks. Now the facing piece is quite narrow, so I did find that was a little bit fiddly to work with. I did interface it, but again, working with viscose fabric, it was quite difficult. And then where you've got the side seam here, you've got a zip that literally just goes down to the top of the waistband area. So it is quite a small section there to get the garment on and off. So I do have to wiggle it over my hips. And once it's on, it's absolutely fine. It feels really comfortable, but I didn't size up on the bodice or anything like that. I just stuck with the straight size 4, and I'm glad I did that because I do find it sits really nicely on my top area. There is enough room to put a top on underneath, but I don't think I would do that because this fabric is quite busy. So I did have a few issues getting the facing in nice and flat, especially when I was inserting the zip. It took me a couple of attempts to get that zip in correct and to have this lined up correctly, where you've got the straight section here, and then when it goes off to a curve here, just to get that sort of flush with each other, it was a little bit difficult. And likewise on the inside, luckily you top stitched the facing down, so it does hold the facing in place. Otherwise I would have had to have hand sewn the facing near the zip just to stop it from flipping about and getting in the way of where the zip does up. So it yeah, that top stitching is actually quite a nice detail. And if you were to use a plain fabric, you could make a feature of that for sure. I would like to make this garment again. At one point I did wonder whether I would ever bother making this pattern again because I wasn't enjoying the sewing process. But I think if I was to use a sturdier fabric, I'd have a little bit more success with sewing it up. And also I would like to make a version in a plain fabric because I do think it would be quite nice to wear in the autumn sort of time with a top on underneath. And I just think that having a plain fabric, it enables you to wear a different variation of top underneath, whereas with a busy fabric you just have to wear a plain top really. The fabric is very busy, as you can see, but I really do quite like that, and it's got this lovely elasticated waist here which cinches you in really nicely. It's about 3/4 of an inch wide, that section there, so it's a nice thick waistband, and the elastic that I bought is actually anti-roll elastic, so it doesn't have any flipping over, so it just stays exactly where it's supposed to be. The trousers have these lovely deep pockets at the top here, so that's a really nice feature, and they just sit diagonal on the front of the trousers so they don't add any bulk to the hip area. They also have a tapered leg, which is not something that I usually am fond of because I feel that it accentuates my hips, but because this fabric is so busy, I don't really think that it adds anything to sort of my hip area as such. So I think it does fit really nicely. It also is really nice fit around the back here, where you've got the waist being cinched in. It doesn't bag out, it just sits nice against my curved back, because I do have a sway back, as you can see here, where I dip in a little bit. Yeah, so that just fits really nicely. It's really comfortable. There's lots of room to bend around and sit down, and that is because I've added that the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance at the sides, just to give me that little bit more wiggle room really. I think that the bodice does come up slightly short on me to where it is supposed to be, so I perhaps should have added a little bit of length to that, because I do think it's supposed to have a little bit more of a blousey effect over the top of the waistband. If you have a look at the picture that Tilly vise on the front of the pattern, you'll see that it does actually have a little bit more drape over the top, but I actually don't mind how it has turned out. I prefer that it's a little bit straighter there, because it just gives me a little bit more of a streamlined look around that area. And I actually did make an alteration to my Tilly and the Buttons Pattern dress that I made a couple of years ago, so that I did have it more streamlined, because that has a blousy effect over the waistband as well. So yeah, it's probably the best for me that it turned out a little bit shorter than I thought. When I read reviews on Instagram, there were quite a few people that said the crotch length was quite long, and you know, it hung in between their legs quite a lot, but I didn't have that problem whatsoever. So I'm really glad that I didn't take any depth out of the crotch. So if I pan you down, you'll see that it doesn't sit too low on me. It's literally just right. It doesn't go up my bum or anything like that. It's really, really comfortable. So I'm really pleased that I didn't make any alteration to that. I also don't have much excess in this area here, as I know a few people have mentioned that, and I think Angela has had that problem as well. But I think because I'm quite hippie and I've got a bit of a bum, I just fill that area a little bit more. Yeah, so that's fine. I think also maybe because my fabric is quite busy, it doesn't show up as much. Yeah, and I know Angela has used a double gauze fabric, so that does have a little bit more give in it, so that might be one of the reasons why she had a bit of a problem with that area. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how this makes up in a different type of fabric if I was to use, say, like a linen with viscose in it, just so it has that little bit more structure to it. I certainly don't think it would be suitable for like a quilting cotton. That would be way too stiff. So considering I had quite a few issues sewing this up because of the fabric type, I am really, really happy with the end result, and I am going to be wearing it a lot more than I thought, which is a good thing, because I think sometimes when you put a lot of energy and effort into making something and you don't end up wearing it, it's quite disheartening. And I know that has happened, you know, in the past, but I'm really pleased that I will end up wearing this after the effort that I put in making it as well. And I am really pleased with the fabric, because it's nice to have quite a busy outfit that can cheer you up on a dull day. And when I've shown people, you know, my version of it, people have complimented me on it. So yeah, it's really nice. So I hope you like my version as well. So what I'm going to do now is hand you on over to Angela, so she will tell you all about her make, and then at the end of this video I will insert some photos and video footage just so you can see the garment a little bit better, because it's quite hard to stand back in this area. So I'll hand you on over to Angela now.
Hiya Karen, and hello everybody. Thank you so much for letting me join your channel today. My name's Angela and I'm Devon Threadtales on YouTube and on Instagram. So this is the Marigold Jumpsuit by Tilly and the Buttons, and this is my version of it. Ever so slightly different from what Karen has done, because I have changed the neckline on mine. I absolutely love Karen's version and the fabric that she's used, but I just felt like this was something that I wanted to do a little bit different. I wanted to have this straight neckline. Now this is something that's really easy to do. You just literally put a ruler down the centre front of the pattern piece on the front bodice, and then another ruler across the top where the sweetheart is at the very top of the sweetheart, and just make that 90-degree angle, and then just join that up and straighten off that pattern piece so that it doesn't sort of dip down into that sweetheart neckline shape. And it's that easy to do. You just need to remember that you need to then mirror that on your facing piece as well. So I made mine out of a double gauze fabric that I bought from Guthrie Garney quite a long time ago. In fact, I think both Karen and I both had bought our fabric in mind with the Marigold jumpsuit, but had both never actually got around to making it. So it worked really well that we both did that and both used the fabric that it had been intended for. So this is a double gauze, and it is a navy blue double gauze, and it has this little sort of paint spot all over it in a silver. It's showing up sort of white on the screen, but it's actually a little bit of a silvery fleck. It's really pretty, really nice. I'll put some pictures in of me wearing it full length so you can see it. The only thing I would say with this double gauze fabric is that when I was pressing it, I realised very quickly that I couldn't use the iron on the right side of the fabric, because the paint spots or ink spots just disappeared and disintegrated as soon as the heat touched it. So that made it a little bit difficult, but I just remedied that by making sure I only pressed it on the back of the fabric, or I used a pressing cloth on the top. And when I say pressing cloth, I don't have an expensive pressing cloth. I mean, I used an old tea towel to put on the top of it. So there are a few things with this jumpsuit that I wanted to mention. I made the size 4 and I didn't make any adjustments with it. My measurements are bust 36, waist 30 and hips 37. And it fits really nicely. I'm really pleased with how it's come out. It's not an overly fitted piece of clothing, so you don't have to fuss with it too much. And I know that Karen made the size 4 too, which correlated to her body measurements. And our fit has been quite different, especially around the trouser area. So I know that Karen has mentioned on hers that her the crotch line is at a good depth for her, but with mine just seems to be a little bit low, and I wish that I just hired that a little bit. It's absolutely fine, and I don't think it's anything that's really noticeable, but for me, I can feel that it's just a little bit low, and if I was to make this again, I would just rise that ever so slightly. Other than that, I'm absolutely fine with the trousers, except for when I first made it, I felt like I had a lot of extra fabric around here, but now I've worn it a few times, I think it's absolutely fine, and I think maybe it was just when I was sort of first putting it together and it hadn't been completely constructed that I felt like it was a little bit too much excess fabric around that crotch area, but I think it's absolutely fine and it falls fine. And I think if I just decrease that crotch length ever so slightly, maybe by about an inch or something like that, any slight bit of excess fabric, that would completely cure that, so that would be really good. They've got really nice deep pockets in them, and they don't add too much bulk to your hips, so that's really great because of the type of pockets they are. They're not inseam, they are, I'm not quite sure what you call them, but sort of like a slash pocket. And yeah, I'm just really pleased with how they look, and that, you know, they're nice and big and you can put lots of things in them. Now I did have a little bit of trouble with the straps, and I've had to sort of mess around with them a little bit because they didn't quite go in properly at the right angle, and I think that Karen had exactly the same situation as me. So I don't think that I've got mine fitting completely brilliantly, and I think that I could have just adjusted them ever so slightly just to get that fit just that bit more perfect if I could, but I think it's absolutely fine as it is, and I'm not going to adjust this now. I'll just be very mindful of that if I make this garment again. One of the things that I really struggled with this jumpsuit is the facing and how it fitted on the front of this. Now this doesn't have anything to do with the fact that I straightened this neckline, because I believe that Karen had exactly the same issues with hers. So what happened is that when you put the facing in, it actually wasn't quite long enough to go all the way around, so I would either adjust that next time to make it just a little bit longer, or just realise that I have to finish off those edges prior to fitting it on, so that, you know, they're not going to run or go funny in the wash when I put it in the washing machine. I did have a bit of problem putting in the zip, so at the moment I've got the zip, and you know, this is an invisible zip, it just goes down to the waistband, and at the moment that looks nice and smooth, and it looks the same as it does on the other side where it doesn't have a zip. But when I first put this in and followed the instructions from Tilling the Buttons instruction book, I just couldn't get it to fit properly, and what ended up happening is, instead of it being nice and smooth like this, is it went like this and then kind of did a big dip down and up again. Now I don't know whether that was something that I did wrong and I just actually put it in wrong, or whether it was the instructions that were a little bit misleading. I'm not quite sure, because Tilly's patterns are normally absolutely fantastic, and they are so fantastically described and have great illustrations, etc, etc. So that was a little bit confusing, and like I say, I'm not entirely sure whether that means I got it wrong or whether the instructions were a bit strange, not sure. But I ended up thinking that I could unpick it, and it was such dark fabric, and I was so frustrated with it that in the end I realised I had only just enough, but I had enough fabric to actually cut out the bodice section again. So I just scrapped the first go and cut it all out again, managed to get the zip out of the first bodice, and then put the zip in as I felt would be correct, and then it just went in a lot better, and I'm really pleased with how that goes in now. Like I say, it only comes down to the waistline. It has an elasticated waist which is nice and soft. I used an anti-roll elastic, which is the same as what Karen used. I've never used that before, and I'd never even heard of it before, but when we were sewing it up, Karen suggested it to me, so I made sure I went and bought some of that, and I'm really pleased that I did, because it's really nice and it's sitting nice and flat. It's quite gathered around the waist, but it's not too gathered. It's not sort of poofy, and it doesn't sort of make a big poofy blousey effect around here, so I'm quite pleased with that. The only other thing to note on this jumpsuit was that for me it was just a little bit too short. I haven't taken this up by the seam allowance that it suggests on the hem, because where the fabric actually landed around my ankle, it kind of was almost the right length already, so if I then took it up by the seam allowance it suggested, it would have been too short. So I actually just finished off the edge with my overlocker, and then just turned it up by 1 centimetre or so, just to hem that in place, and that's absolutely fine. So if I was to make this garment again, I would decrease the crotch length, I would lengthen the legs, and I think I would like to have a go at making the sweetheart neckline next time, as the pattern is meant to be, like Karen has, because I absolutely love her version. I really love the fact that our versions are so different from each other, not only because of the necklines, but the different fabric that we've used, and also the different pattern of the fabrics that we've used. They just look so different. I absolutely love Karen's. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. So would I make this again or not? Okay, I'm not 100% sure. I think I haven't worn this out yet, and the reason I haven't worn it out is because I always try and keep things nice before I do my video. So I haven't really sort of felt and seen what I would feel like wearing this out and about. So I think I need to wear it a few more times around and see how I feel about it before I decide whether it's something I'd like to make. One thing I would say is, because I've made this out of double gauze, it's quite a warm day today, and I've popped it on now, and I am really, really hot. So I think it would be good to make this in a viscose like Karen has, even though Karen hasn't enjoyed making it out of viscose, not being her favourite kind of fabric to sew with. But I think I would like to give it a go in viscose, because I think the drape of it and everything would completely change by doing that. So overall, I'm really, really pleased with this, and I would like to possibly have a go at making it again, but I'll probably wait until next summer before I do that. If you'd like to see my video, do hop over and have a little look. Thanks again, Karen, for having me. I really hope that we do get to do a collaboration again, but like you say, hopefully we'll try and do it in a time where we've both got a bit more time to be able to sew together, because it's always lots of fun. Anyway, take care, see you again, bye!
I just absolutely love Angela's version. I think it's really, really nice to have a plainish fabric, so she has the opportunity to wear it with the top underneath, and I just think it's just a really nice fabric as well, you know, with the little dots on it, and just to have a plain jumpsuit. So I am definitely going to make it again in a plain fabric myself. You know, it's great that we have both made it in different fabrics again, and are able to give you our review on how we have found sewing it up and how we feel the garment has been finished. Yeah, so it's just been really, really thoroughly enjoyable to be able to do this with Angela again. So thank you, Angela, so much for doing this. We are going to be doing another collaboration in the future, so keep your eyes peeled. We will have another one coming out soon. It might be a little bit sooner than the gap between our first and second one, just because the children have now gone back to school, so have a little bit more opportunity to get things done. So I'll just now insert the photos and video footage of our jumpsuits, and then I shall see you after that. Thank you very much for watching today. Please do give me a like and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. And I shall see you again very soon. Thanks very much. Bye.